Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz, coming to you from Los Angeles, and here are the stories we're watching tonight, starting with that 70 show star Danny Masterson, sentenced to 30 years in prison after being found guilty of raping 2 women in the early 2000s.
Just because it's a delayed reporting, even if it's been 20 years, it still matters. A crime still happened, and somebody needs to be held accountable.
Now, those 2 victims addressing the former sitcom actor today during his sentencing. We'll tell you what they said coming up. Then screams for help just might have saved the life of a man trapped 100 feet down in a ravine after crashing his truck.
I turned off my motorcycle and took my helmet off, then I could hear him yelling for help down there.
And we know how he got out of jail, but where is he right now? As authorities have now spent over a week trying to get him back in. The latest on the manhunt for the convicted killer on the loose in Pennsylvania. And an asteroid just zipped by us pretty closely. How close? Well, put it this way. It was a lot closer to us than GPS satellites orbit the Earth. Wait till you hear what NASA is saying about the 4 other asteroids they're tracking. And as we come to you tonight, we've got new details on the search for escaped killer Danilo Cavalcante as the manhunt for him enters its 8th day.
So an individual reported that that he had seen someone matching that description, and he provided us a location that he had seen them running through that area, and so searchers have gone to that area.
Now, police are describing Cavalcante as pretty agile, which we all saw from that escape video where he crab walked vertically up that wall. The search area for the convicted killer has now grown tonight, with police saying they're looking in an 8 to 10 mile radius. Meanwhile, schools in that area are back open today after police say they cleared the search areas around those schools. But with the manhunt going on for as long as it has, a lot of people living in that area are wondering why it's taking so long to catch him.
6th day, 7th day? That's a long time.
Search, if you count the day that he escaped, so.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Especially if he's only still in this area, it's what they think he's at. That's with all the dogs and everything else, I just can't understand why that could be.
NBC's George Solis joins us now from Pennsylvania. George, so this new sighting, what kind of area are we talking about here?
Yeah, Gadi, we actually have some new details. It appears that police appear to be looking right back in that Longwood Gardens area. That's the botanical gardens that we've been talking about, and where this earlier sighting would have been the 8th was reported at that news conference. We're getting word from Longwood Gardens tonight saying that in cooperation with authorities, we have closed the gardens and cleared the property of guests. Police are currently searching an area of interest on the property. Tenants on the property are sheltering in place. The gardens will remain closed until further notice. And this goes in line with some of the reporting we've been hearing from some of our affiliates who have been on the ground and have noticed an active police presence. We have also reached out to Pennsylvania State Police, who at the moment are not confirming that there is an active search happening in that area. But clearly, based on what we're hearing from Longwood Gardens, it does appear to be an area of interest. And this is sort of the game that we've been seeing day in and day out as this manhunt enters its 2nd week. Information comes in. Police, of course, have to respond to it. But at this point, Pennsylvania State Police telling me Danilo Cavalcante is not in custody. Gadi?
And when it comes to those gardens, I mean, we've seen investigators circle those gardens, go in, they closed them down, they searched them, they cleared them, and now they are closed again. I mean, how sure are police that they have the right search area here?
Yeah, and it's a question that we keep pressing officials on. Has Danilo Cavalcante broken outside of the perimeter? I mean, he was initially sort of in this 2 mile radius, right, where we all focus just outside of the prison here. Then he broke that containment, seen in Longwood Gardens, that trail camera picking him up. And then he was spotted even east of that at one point. And now it seems that he's back in that Longwood Gardens area. But police say they have all the technology at their disposal. They're searching day and night to see if they find any trace of him. They know that he's agile, clearly from the video, and they know that he has a lot of wooded area out here that he can hide in. But they still remain committed to saying, we believe he is within this 8 to 10 mile radius. And now with this new information that they're really scouring the gardens, they are really hoping that they can bring this to a conclusion tonight, Gadi.
And it seems as though he's got supplies now, right? In the first videos, we saw him shirtless, or at least the images of him without a shirt. Now it looks like if it is him, it's somebody with clothing and possibly a backpack. What does that tell investigators?
Yeah, and it's something that they have been warning the public about from basically day one, to make sure their doors are locked, to make sure that he doesn't have any access to prolong this manhunt. And you're right, they definitely know that he has collected some items. They don't know where he got them from. One thing they do seem to be confident in is that there's at least no one helping him along the way, so he is foraging. Earlier today, though, I did speak with the sister of Cavalcante's victim, the ex-girlfriend that he stabbed 38 times, saying he was actually raised in Brazil and in a pretty familiar climate, saying that he's pretty accustomed to being out in the woods. It was really an interesting conversation, saying he's a monster and that he really destroyed this family. She fears for her own safety while he's out here on the run, saying she is glued to her phone, glued to the television, like so many people in this community are, hoping he is caught because she wants to get back to her daily routine. Here's a little bit more of my conversation with her, Gadi.
I'm scared, me and my family, all the time, because I think in my mind is coming now.
You're afraid he's hiding?
Yes, here in my backyard, in my house. I'm scared all the time.
Are you sleeping?
No, no.
I mean, just imagine, you know that this person already harmed your family and he's out there on the run. It is so hard for her to process all of this that's been happening, just not far from them, frankly. And she's telling me that they're all hunkering together in their home, just waiting for word. Her family has been through so much already, and they just don't know how much more they can take with this killer still out there on the loose. But again, with this potential sighting that we're learning about tonight, Gadi, the real hope here from not just the family, but everyone in this community, and frankly, everyone that's been watching this, is hopefully this comes to an end. Gadi?
Yeah, I can't imagine what that family's going through. Real quick, are the police offering them protection?
Great question. She tells me that, yes, they are being monitored 24/7. They are constantly being checked in on by phone, by text. They are being closely watched. They are surrounding this family because they know, obviously, because of the circumstances, they are of potential interest to Cavalcante. So, yeah, they're being closely watched, Gadi.
Here's hoping for a resolution tonight. George Solis, thanks so much. Meanwhile, here in L.A., that 70s show star Danny Masterson was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison today. Back in May, the 47-year-old was found guilty of raping 2 women in the early 2000s. The victims say both attacks took place at his Hollywood Hills home at the peak of his popularity. And after the sentencing, L.A. County's deputy district attorney thanked the victims for bravely coming forward.
I was so happy to see them in court when they were able to get up there, give their impact statements, and have their voices be heard, and to be able to express themselves on the significance and the impact that the crimes had upon them. It was wonderful to see, and this is a day for them.
And joining us now from outside the courthouse is NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin. Dana, there were no cameras allowed in the courtroom today, but what went down?
Well, I can tell you, Gadi, that judge admonished Masterson while she handed down that sentencing, saying, quote, "Mr. Masterson, you are not the victim here." It was very emotional for those 2 victims that showed up in court. They got to read victim impact statements. I want to pull some of those up so I can read them to you. Jane Doe 1 said, "I knew he belonged behind bars for the safety of all the women he came into contact with. I am so sorry, and I'm so upset. I wish I'd reported him sooner to the police." Jane Doe 2 wrote, "When you raped me, you stole from me. That's what rape is, a theft of the spirit. You are pathetic, disturbed, and completely violent. The world is better off with you in prison." And Gadi, we saw this emotional moment as both of those women left the courthouse hand in hand, clinging to one another, still tears in their eyes as they walked away from what is considered a day of justice for these women who have had to endure decades of pain that still impacts their daily lives.
And has Masterson responded to the sentence?
So we haven't heard specifically from him. As the judge was reading that sentencing, he showed no emotion, but his attorney came out of the courtroom moments later and read a statement to us. Listen to what she told us.
The errors which occurred in this case are substantial and unfortunately led to verdicts which are not supported by the evidence. Mr. Masterson did not commit the crimes for which he has been convicted, and we and the appellate lawyers, who are the best and the brightest in the country, are confident that these convictions will be reversed.
Sean Hawley, the attorney that you're listening to, also mentioned that she has lawyers, appellate lawyers across the country that have been going through the transcripts from this trial, and they claim they found some inaccuracies, some errors that she says will help when they file those briefs to try to overturn these convictions. Gadi?
And now that the criminal proceedings are done, his victim's civil suit against him, as well as the Church of Scientology, it can proceed, right? What's the role in Scientology in all of this, and what's going to happen now?
Yeah, so both trials centered around this controversial church that was accused of trying to silence these women who were former members of the church. Masterson still belongs to the Church of Scientology. They say, the judge said, during that retrial that Scientology is not the defendant, but the judge allowed the women to talk about how members of the church pressured them to not go to the police with their stories. And we've heard from the women's attorneys that they plan to continue to talk about this issue, so there could be a civil lawsuit. We even asked the prosecutor in this case, could there be charges filed against those members since they presented evidence that showed there may have been some sort of coercion, and the prosecutor said he could not comment. So that's something that we'll probably be watching for in the future, Gadi.
NBC's Dana Griffin, thanks so much. And tonight, a 68-year-old California man is recovering after being trapped in a ravine without any food or water for 5 days. On September 2nd, the Kern County Fire Department responded to a call of a man hurt 100 feet below the edge of a cliff. And Calvin Smith had been driving his car when it went off the embankment, throwing him 40 feet from that truck right there. He broke his ribs and 2 vertebrae in his back. Now, a Good Samaritan found him, immediately called 911. This is a video of that rescue, and Calvin says he is just glad to be alive.
Cold at night, ice cold, and running up out during the daytime. I kept asking God, please don't let me die here. Please don't let me die out here.
And NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer joins us now. Miguel, so 5 days. I imagine some people must have gone by him while he was down in that ravine. How did he finally get found?
Well, he said he heard a noise on the 5th day, and he thought it was 2 bikers who were in the area. He started crying out for help. There was 2 bikers in that area. It's a mountain bike. It's a dirt bike. This is a small backcountry road that is traversed by cars, but for the most part, it's used by hikers. It's used by folks who are on foot and also on these dirt bikes. He heard the dirt bikes passing by. He then was able to yell at one of them. Someone stopped. They saw him. They traveled down the ravine and they found him. That man, Corey Sizlove, says he was surprised to find someone alive. Here's what he told us a short time ago.
I was thinking there's probably no way anyone could live through that if there was, someone down there. But when I heard him yelling for help, I was really shocked. He wasn't bleeding anywhere. It was pretty amazing. I just thank God that he made us a part of that day.
No, Gadi, he did have some serious injuries. He's still in the hospital recovering, but a miracle he was found alive.
An absolute miracle. I can't, with dirt bikes, 2 dirt bikes, over the sound of those dirt bikes to hear somebody calling for help. Now, no food, I can kind of understand, but in the desert with no water for 5 days, how did he survive?
First responders said it was a miracle. They said the days were very, very hot and the nights were very cold, but somehow he managed to survive. He had no food, he had no water. The first thing that rescuer that came down the hill and found him, the first time he saw him, he said, please, do you have any water? And he did. He gave him water. He gave him some shade with his shirt. And then he called 911, and that's how they found him.
Wow. And then eventually they called his family. And I was reading this blew my mind. 10 kids, like 44 grandkids. Have they reacted to the news here?
Yeah, he's a great-grandfather as well. They are all thrilled that he's alive. He was taking his son to the hospital in Bakersfield. That's how this all unfolded. He said he was following his GPS on a phone. It took him down a back road. He went up that back road, realized this was not where he should have been. He was actually reversing the vehicle when it flipped down that ravine and went 100 feet down. A miracle he's alive. Of course, his family thrilled. His wife is by his side today.
An absolute miracle. Miguel, thanks so much
for sharing
this. And some developments tonight on the investigation into President Donald Trump's alleged attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. Today, former Trump advisor Peter Navarro was convicted of contempt of Congress because he didn't comply with a congressional subpoena. A federal jury in D.C. found Navarro guilty after deliberating for about 4 hours, convicting him of 2 counts for refusing to testify and not turning over documents to the House January 6th committee. Now, each count carries a year in prison and a fine of up to $100,000. His sentencing is set for January 12th. Powerful and getting stronger. That is the word tonight on Hurricane Lee. This storm is already a full-fledged Category 4, and it could be a Category 5 by tomorrow. Right now, it is way too early to know exactly where it's going. But Bill Cairns is here with the latest track. Bill, you tweeted just a little, or X'd, I guess you should say, just a little earlier, this model that could get interesting for parts of the East Coast. What's the latest there?
Yeah, every day that goes by that I can't eliminate the East Coast means you should kind of keep a closer eye on this. And you should already have your hurricane preps anyways. If you live in Outer Banks or southern New England or up in Nova Scotia and the Maritimes, you get storms every couple of years. So, hopefully you don't have to do any late runs to like the hardware store come next week. So here's the storm itself. You just showed that impressive shot. Here's another one of the eye at sunset. And it's not often you get to see this close imagery. These pictures are taken every 1 minute at 1 kilometer resolution. So you literally can see the ocean floor in it. So here's an infrared view. This is a different view. We colorize the cloud tops. The colder they are, the brighter we red, because thunderstorms go up the highest in the atmosphere. They're the coldest. So when we see the really cold center, that's how we know it's a strong storm. And obviously, when you get such symmetry and a symmetrical eye there, that's when you know you're dealing with a really strong storm. The first aircraft is going to fly into this tonight to give us our actual first measurements in the eye. And we'll know officially just how strong it is. Tomorrow, it is expected to get up to a Category 5. The Hurricane Center actually peaks it tomorrow at about 165-mile-per-hour winds. When you hear that, you're like, all right, no one wants to deal with that. And there's a chance no one will. And it is very doubtful anyone will deal with this at Category 4 or 5 strength. It will weaken after that point. So a lot of people want to know, well, where's it heading then? Well, it looks like it keeps on that track. Somewhere by the time we get to, say, about Monday or Tuesday, it stops heading towards the Bahamas and Florida. That's why no one's really saying, look out there. It looks to take a north turn. So the Bermuda is the obvious first choice. And where it makes this turn is very important because it looks to head mostly due north at that point. It doesn't look to curve out much. Here's our American model. These are our spaghetti lines. And we take that model and divide it up and tweak it a little bit to see what would happen if we change just a little bit. And it moves pretty much due northward. That would almost be a bigger threat up here to Nova Scotia, the Halifax area, Yarmouth. But the European model that came in, the one you were talking about, all of these blue lines, some do curve it away, some do take it up into Nova Scotia, but there's enough lines in here into Maine and even eastern portions there of Cape Cod and Massachusetts that we have to watch that carefully, Gadi. So again, until we can rule people out and say you don't have to worry about it, this is a storm to watch. By the time it got up in this area, if it does make landfall, it would likely be more of like a Category 1 or 2 hurricane, but that's still a big deal for areas that don't get hit that often.
A huge deal. Bill Cairns, thanks so much. Okay. Still to come, auto workers are preparing to strike. 150,000 workers could soon hit the picket line if they can't reach a deal with some of the biggest car makers in the country.
No one said a word when these CEOs gave themselves 40% increases over the last 4 years. But when workers ask for their fair share, all of a sudden, it's a huge problem.
Hey, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. President Biden is off to India for a stop at the G20 summit and then to Vietnam. Now, the trip is strategic as Biden is pushing to boost relationships with both countries to show the U.S. is a better economic and security partner than China. And speaking of Biden, the president rejected a list of proposed conditions sought by the accused mastermind and 4 others involved in 9/11. The 5 were offered a plea deal that would spare them from the death penalty if they admitted guilt and took a life prison term, but they responded with conditions including not being in solitary confinement. They are still awaiting trial. And a 24-year-old man died after being found unresponsive at Georgia's Fulton County Jail, marking the 6th death in 6 weeks there. A jail staff attempted to revive Deshandre Delmore before he was taken to the hospital. This jail is already being investigated by the Justice Department for potential civil rights violations. And Google will now require all election ads to include a disclosure when it uses AI-generated content. Now, the policy will take effect in November, and it applies to images, videos, and audio content. And Google says it's making the change due to an increased use of AI. Bruce Springsteen fans will have to venture to the land of hopes and dreams to wish for his tour to resume soon. The rocker postponed several shows through at least November as he is being treated for ulcer disease. In a post, Springsteen and his E Street bandmates say they are heartbroken to have to postpone that tour. And the countdown is on. There's just about 1 week left until the contract between some of the biggest car makers in the country and the United Auto Workers Union expires. That means 150,000 auto workers with General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis could be on strike as early as next week, and that could have huge economic ramifications. NBC's Tom Costello has the latest.
It's a high-stakes showdown in Motor City. Workers at Ford, GM, and Chrysler, owned by Stellantis, now just a week away from walking off the job if their demands aren't met, including a 46% pay raise compounded over 4 years and the restoration of traditional pension benefits. Today, some signs of progress.
We recently put an offer on the table to the union.
GM offered a 10% pay hike plus 2-3% lump sum payments with some inflation adjustments. But the UAW president quickly called that offer insulting.
No one said a word when these CEOs gave themselves 40% increases over the last 4 years. But when workers ask for their fair share, all of a sudden, it's a huge problem.
The UAW also rejected Ford's 9% counteroffer. Stellantis says its counteroffer will come by the end of the week.
Jump in and give you a ride to Washington.
A potential mega strike in Michigan is bad news for President Biden, who's pushed the industry to go green and needs Michigan voters. But while the UAW typically supports Democrats, it's withholding a Biden endorsement for now.
Our endorsements are going to be earned, not freely given, and actions are going to dictate who we endorse.
CNBC's Phil LeBeau covers the auto industry.
From the UAW's perspective, it needs the White House to lean on the automakers as much as possible so that they can get the best contract possible. The only leverage the UAW has with the White House is withholding an endorsement of President Biden.
Tonight, industry insiders and analysts believe a strike is still very, very likely. The biggest sticking point, how much more will the big three have to pay their 146,000 workers? Is 40 to 46% outrageous? Where will they actually compromise? Gadi?
Yeah, Tom Costello, thanks so much. And coming up, severely burned animals in Maui are getting the help they need, and we've got those details coming up for you. But first, you got to see this body cam footage of a North Carolina police officer saving a driver from a burning tractor trailer just moments before it exploded. Police say the truck hit a concrete barrier and then caught fire, and Lieutenant Corey Brooks happened to be driving behind that truck, called the crash in over his radio, then ran to rescue the unresponsive driver without ever missing a beat. Lieutenant Brooks is being awarded for that heroic action and just an incredible rescue. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the stories happening out here on the West Coast that we're watching right now. Today, California's Governor Gavin Newsom said he wants to boost the number of National Guard troops at the border to fight the flow of fentanyl and drugs coming across. Right now, there are about 40 service members at each port of entry. Newsom's decision will bump that number up to 60. Now, last year, California saw a whopping 594% increase in seized fentanyl. That's more than 28,000 pounds seized in 2022 alone. And a student at San Diego State University says they were sexually assaulted by a rideshare driver last weekend. And this is the second time in just a few weeks that a San Diego State student has reported that exact kind of attack. The victim says the rideshare car was a sedan but was unsure of the make and model, and police are now investigating. And get ready for a SoCal glow up with this last story. Bioluminescence lighting up the waters from San Diego to Oxnard with these insanely cool blue lights. It's like something out of the movie Avatar in the water. It is caused by algae that turns the ocean red during the day, then glows blue at night. It is perfectly safe, as you can see from those boogie boarders showing us the night lighting up down in Huntington Beach. And now we turn to another group recovering from the impact of the Lahaina wildfires, those beloved pets. The Maui Humane Society is caring for severely burned animals that survived the wildfire and are reuniting them with their owners. And Mahalani Richardson has a story. And we want to warn you, some of what you might see may be hard to watch.
These are some of the helpless victims of the Lahaina wildfire. Roman ran off from his dog sitter and suffered severe burns. He was rescued by a Good Samaritan and reunited with his owner thanks to a microchip.
Yes, me too.
Here at the Maui Humane Society in Pu'unene, more than 20 burned animals are under constant care, needing daily bandage changes, pain medication, antibiotics, and fluids.
It is very difficult to see these animals in such tremendous pain.
This is little Mamaki, and someone turned her in 3 weeks after the Lahaina wildfire. You can see, she has all of these bandages, and she's not very comfortable, but doctors give her a good prognosis, and they say that she's going to be okay after some loving care. I know. I know.
The majority of the animals that we are caring for right now are severe burn victims. Whether it's the ears of cats, the whiskers that have been completely singed, and unfortunately the paw pads of a lot of these animals have been either down to the bone or extremely raw.
He gets a hydro one from vet staff on days of his bandage changes just to help because he's a little extra painful.
Tiffany Davis is a foster vet tech. She's caring for Nigel, who came from Lahaina.
I love him. And just 2 days ago, he started trying to play ball a little bit as best as he could. So he's feeling better, and he's getting more and more sassy every day.
The Maui Humane Society, along with a team of animal groups, have been escorted by the National Guard into the burn zone since last week, where they set up traps in hopes of finding more lost animals.
We want the community to know that we are here for them and that we are going to be doing everything that we can to reunite them with their pets, because we know that pets are a part of the ohana.
Oh, you like this thing? Oh, sweetheart.
Another animal patient in the clinic is named Ho'omo, in Hawaiian, to carry on. Despite the heartbreaking loss of Lahaina, it's about perseverance for these animals and the people who cherish them.
And this is a long road of recovery, and we're in this for the long haul.
Reporting from Pu'unene in central Maui, Mahealani Richardson, Hawaii News Now.
Mahealani, thanks so much for that report. And turning now to controversy brewing in not just one or two, but several California school districts. It's all over a new policy that would require teachers and staff to tell parents if their student changes their identity or pronouns while at school. And school board members in the city of Rocklin approved the policy early this morning, right before 1 a.m. So why so late? Because there were over 100 people who showed up for public comments, a lot of them staying outside because it was so packed. Those against the policy worry the change would out kids before they're ready to share that information with their families. Others saying parents have a right to know. Take a listen.
Really, the bigger concern is that this is absolutely putting the onus on the wrong people. This is putting it on children to self-report identities that they're still, shaping for themselves. And it's putting liability on teachers who now have this 3-day requirement to out their students.
I wholeheartedly agree with these changes from a parent perspective and from a supporting the teacher's perspective. Again, the majority of the teachers that I talk to hold the view of supporting this.
But just hours before Rocklin approved this policy, a judge stopped a similar policy in another California school district, this one in Chino Valley. And there are even more districts taking the issue up this year as well. NBC News legal analyst Angela Sinandela joins us now. Angela, thanks so much for being with us. School districts pushing for this policy argue it seeks to involve parents so that they can properly support what their students are doing on campus. That's all leading to some heated board meetings. Here's a quick listen to what happened last night in Rocklin.
I question whether or not very many people have actually read and understood the policy. It says, folks, it amazes me that people say it's not inclusive. What we're looking to do is include families all together.
So, Angela, how does this policy work, and what grades are we talking about here?
So, Gadi, this is extremely controversial, and they didn't really limit it to grades, so it's unclear. And that's one of the reasons why the Attorney General really attempted to get this banned. And so currently there is a temporary restraining order because of one of the reasons, which is that of total vagueness. But what the policy really tries to do is really just notify. It's all about notification. And if you think about what the teachers' responsibilities are right now in the classrooms, they actually have to notify the parents about so many issues. So the requirements already outside of this policy include mental health, gender issues, and all sorts of policies. So with this specific nitty-gritty, if we get into it, it's about notifying within 3 days if your child has any requests related to their gender that are specific to the classroom or school. So if they want a facility change, if they want to use different bathrooms, if they want to be known by a different gender, if they want a different name or even a different nickname, teachers would then be required within 3 days to notify the parents.
And a judge has halted that policy in one district here in California, right? What does that mean for Rocklin with this happening just last night?
So across the whole state, it means that all of these policies are going to be questioned and are not really going to be legal. They can be challenged easily and thus dismissed. But I think the bigger question here is that this is the beginning. I think that we're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court with this. This is a challenge based on privacy rights. The 14th Amendment of our Constitution protects parenting rights. It's where all of these huge issues come together, and we're going to see this continue. This battle is just beginning, Gadi.
Angela, thanks so much for keeping an eye on it for us.
Thank you.
And next, an extremely complicated rescue operation. An American with internal bleeding is trapped 3,000 feet in a cave in Turkey, and it could take weeks to get him out.
As you can see, I'm up, I'm alert, I'm talking, but I'm not healed on the inside yet, so I'm going to need a lot of help to get out of here.
Hey there, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. A giant manhunt is underway in Britain for this former soldier that's facing terrorism charges. The 21-year-old escaped from a London prison yesterday, and get this, he did it by strapping himself to the bottom of a food delivery van. He's accused of planting fake bombs on a military base and violating the UK's Secrets Act. An abortion has now been decriminalized all across Mexico. The country's Supreme Court made that ruling yesterday, saying that any sort of punishment for abortion is an act of gender-based violence and discrimination. It's the latest in a trend of Latin American countries loosening restrictions on abortions. And Japan has a liftoff. The country just launched a rocket outfitted with an X-ray telescope in hopes of understanding how celestial objects are made. The Japanese Space Agency hopes to solve the giant mystery of how the universe was created. And archaeologists in Peru have recently discovered a 1,000-year-old mummy with long brown hair still intact. The archaeologist in charge said the remains belong to an adult found in a seated position with knees bent. The team also found ceramic vessels and other artifacts there as well. And all of this was found smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood in the capital of Lima. And in Turkey, there is an American cave explorer stuck over 1,000 feet underground, all while he's suffering from internal bleeding. More than 150 rescuers are racing to get him out. Earlier today, 40-year-old Mark Dickey shared an emotional update on his condition.
As you can see, I'm up, I'm alert, I'm talking, but I'm not healed on the inside yet, so I'm going to need a lot of help to get out of here. It's really special. Be taken care of.
NBC's Matt Bradley has the latest.
So we just saw video of Mark Dickey himself. This is that American cave explorer who's been trapped underground in one of the deepest caves here in Turkey for the better part of the past week. He developed gastrointestinal bleeding last weekend, and he's had to have a blood transfusion, which is essentially, as he said himself, kept him alive. But we've just heard this video where Dickey himself was speaking to the camera. He said that he was feeling better, and he looks like he's okay. But this is internal bleeding. So he said himself, you know, you can't actually see any of the problems that I'm experiencing. One of the real issues here is whether or not he's going to be able to walk himself out of this cave. Now, the fact is because of this internal bleeding, he's not going to be able to do a lot of the things that cave explorers are expected to do and have to do in order to traverse really what is, according to experienced professionals, this particular cave is one of the most difficult caves of any throughout the world, which is making this rescue one of the most time-consuming and one of the most labor-intensive rescues that we've seen in recent memory. So again, whether or not Dickey can walk himself out, that's a big question, because the fact is he's not going to be able to turn and twist his body around these, you know, sharp turns and narrow passageways that are the same ones that he got through in order to get there. Now, with this internal bleeding, he can't afford to press himself against a cave wall or any sharp corners, so he might need to be carried out by a stretcher. If that's the case, that would make this operation a lot more time-consuming, a lot more dangerous, and a lot more difficult. Now, that would mean that they're going to have to continue, the rescue workers, doing what they've been doing, which is kind of filing away at some of those cave walls in order to try to clear passages, because getting a stretcher through a cave is a very, very difficult operation. That could take a very long time. And again, you know, Dickey himself, it sounds like he wants to be able to walk himself out of the cave. That might not be possible considering his physical circumstances.
Harrowing. Matt Bradley, thanks so much. And Ukrainian forces are making progress against Russian troops, and that is the word coming from Secretary of State Antony Blinken in an exclusive interview with NBC News. Our foreign correspondent Richard Engel met with Secretary Blinken today in Kyiv, and here's a little bit more of that conversation.
As Ukrainian forces grind out their counteroffensive against entrenched Russian troops, Secretary of State Antony Blinken insists Ukraine is finally making advances.
I think we're seeing very tangible progress over the last couple of weeks on the front lines, in the east and in the south. It's hard.
So far, in the last 3 months, progress has been very, very slow. The recent offensive, the gains have been little villages, a little area here. You think we're starting to see more progress?
It's step by step. We're with them. We'll remain with them. And not just us. Again, many other countries around the world.
We'll remain with them. But opinion polls suggest that Americans might not be in this for the long haul. So are you making false promises, saying, yes, we're with you, the American people are with you for the long haul, when they might not be?
So first, I believe part of my responsibility, part of my job, and this is true for the president and many others in the administration, is of course to talk to our own people, to continuously try to make clear what's at stake if we allow this aggression by Russia to go uncontested. If we allow it to go forward with impunity, then you open a Pandora's box, and it's a recipe for conflict around the world. Would-be aggressors say, hey, the Russians can do it, I can do it. That's not a world that Americans want to live in.
Blinken's visit came amid more deadly Russian strikes. At least 17 Ukrainians were killed Wednesday in this market. And now there are fears Russia, which, like Ukraine, is running low on weapons and ammunition, could get more from a new source.
All indications are that President Putin and Kim Jong-un are going to meet next week. Do you know when?
Don't know when, but we've seen that, and I think that speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about the desperation that Russia has if it's going around the world trying to find support and weapons from North Korea.
Desperate, but it could work. Do you think it could have an impact, tip the balance?
We've been very concerned about the fact that Russia has already been getting weaponry, particularly drones, from Iran. We're certainly concerned at the prospect of it getting more from North Korea. So we will look at every possible means we have to prevent that, to disrupt that, working with other countries.
And Secretary Blinken told us that peace negotiations don't look promising, that Russian President Putin does not seem interested in diplomacy.
NBC's Richard Engel, thanks so much. And President Biden is making his way to India for the G20 summit. But what are the chances it might not be called India for a lot longer? India's ruling party is now talking about voting to change the name to Bharat to push to get rid of colonial influences. But some think there's a lot more to the story than just that. NBC's Josh Letterman has more.
With just a few swapped syllables, a seismic move by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, just days before the world's most powerful leaders arrive for a summit that Modi hopes will showcase his nation's rise as a major global player. A potential change to India's name from, well, India to Bharat, another term for India, but in Hindi or Sanskrit. But why? Modi's right-wing nationalist party, the BJP, says India is a symbol of the nation's British colonial past, with its painful legacy of slavery.
India, that is Bharat. It is there in the Constitution.
Some Indians telling NBC News they like the name change. One saying, quote, "Now we get to use it in our own language. We feel pride in saying it." But others are questioning why the government is focusing on a name change, saying there are bigger problems to address, like helping the poor. And this isn't Modi's first controversial name change. The city of Allahabad became Prayagraj, trading out a Muslim name for one that hadn't been used since the 16th century. And the Mughal garden at the president's palace in New Delhi became Amrit Uidan. Critics say it's part of an effort by Modi, a Hindu, and his right-wing party to drum up Hindu nationalist sentiments and erase the history of the Muslims who ruled this country for years and remain a huge part of it, with some 200 million Muslims in the country today, some of whom say they're increasingly under attack under Modi's rule.
So Mr. Modi's political ideology, it believes in Hindu nationalism and targeting Muslims and Christians. And that is what he has been trying to do with every single action, whether it is in Kashmir, whether it is in Manipur, whether it is in any other law that he wants to bring to this country right now.
One opposition leader saying it would be foolish to dispense with an incalculable brand value that's been built up over centuries, especially when India has 22 official languages and Hindi is spoken by less than half the population.
NBC's Josh Letterman, thanks so much. And breaking news out of the U.S. Open in New York tonight, right in the middle of semifinal play between Coco Gauff and Karolina Muchova, a protest grinding everything to a halt. Apparently, at least 3 climate protesters started screaming "End fossil fuels" so loud that it disrupted play just after 8 p.m., apparently gluing their bare feet to the stands. Broadcasters cut away from the protesters, but video posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, shows what went down. Of course, we're going to keep you updated on what is going on there as this develops. NYPD officers are now reportedly supporting the security team at the U.S. Open. We're trying to get those protesters removed, but again, those protesters apparently have glued their feet to the stands. And before we go, not 1, not 2, but 5 asteroids are passing by Earth this week. But don't freak out. We're going to take a very close look, so stay tuned. And now some future of everything headlines. Microsoft says it is building a massive AI model specifically designed to identify cancer. Now, the tech giant is working with another company called Paige, which develops AI for pathologists. They say the goal here is to build an AI platform that can analyze billions and billions of images and scans, making it easier for pathologists to find cancer cells. Now, researchers are hoping this will help doctors keep up with the growing number of cancer diagnoses, both common and rare. And remember that movie, Don't Look Up? Well, ever since it came out, seems like looking up as much as possible is a good idea, and with good reason. NASA says there are more than 1 million asteroids out there just zipping around our solar system, and most flying between Mars and Jupiter. But there are about 30,000 so-called near-Earth asteroids, and don't worry, astronomers are really only worried about like 2,300 of them. And this week, at least a handful are scheduled to zoom by us here on Earth. Of the 5 that NASA is tracking right now, somewhat near us, 2 are about the size of a plane, 3 are about the size of a bus, and fortunately 0 are on a crash course with Earth. But there was a newly discovered asteroid today that apparently cruised within just a few thousand miles of Earth, closer to us than some of our own GPS satellites. And joining us now is Paul Sutter. He's an astrophysicist, a NASA advisor, and author of How to Die in Space, a journey through dangerous astrophysical phenomenon. He joins us now. Thanks so much for being with us. So this latest asteroid, that's like 6'5", which is about the size of our friend Jake Ward, if you watch the show. What would happen if something like that did crash into Earth?
Oh, that's an easy one. Absolutely nothing. Thankfully, the surface of the Earth is protected by a security blanket known as our atmosphere. And air is very thin, but these rocks are traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour. And when they impact the atmosphere, it's like slamming into concrete. And they heat up so much that they just dissolve in our atmosphere. That one would make a nice, pretty light show, and that's about it.
Just a little sparkler. That's what we like.
Yeah.
There's another asteroid. I'm obsessed with this one. This one's been making headlines tonight. It's the one that NASA crashed into on purpose last year, testing our planetary defenses, right? Apparently, it's acting weird. And when I hear acting weird, I automatically think like E.T. kind of weird. But can you tell us what's really going on here?
No, thankfully, this is not ET weird. It's just gravity weird. So last year, NASA impacted an asteroid called Dimorphos on purpose to test our ability to deflect the path of asteroids. We've never done this before. We didn't know what would happen when we slammed a half-ton satellite into a rock over 500 feet across. Turns out it was a great success. We greatly changed the path of that little asteroid, but it's actually going a little bit slower now than expected a year later. We developed a lot of computer models and simulations about what would happen post-impact, and it's actually having a greater effect post-impact than we thought it would. And so now the mystery is to try to figure out what happened to all the energy.
And my favorite part about this, who figured that out? Who noticed it? Was it astrophysicists?
It turns out there was a high school teacher that was making observations just locally with a backyard telescope of this little asteroid and noticed the discrepancy. The team behind DART, the Double Asteroid Redirect Test mission, is going to make their own announcements in the coming weeks.
Could you imagine that teacher just rolling into his class afterwards, being like, I have something to tell NASA. and when we see like this swarm of boulders possibly shaken off the surface, and we're starting to analyze it now, what does that tell us about trajectories?
Yeah, exactly. So asteroids are not simple rocks floating in space. They're loose rubble piles. They're barely held together with their own gravity. And so part of the point of this mission was to examine what happens when we strike an asteroid. In this case, some of the boulders, the few feet across each that were sitting on the surface, got shaken loose either by the initial impact or by seismic vibrations that rippled through the asteroid after the impact that just shook off the boulders like a dog shaking off water.
And we talk a lot about leaving Earth to find asteroids, but one is about to come back, one of those missions. Here's a NASA trailer for this upcoming return of a mission that was launched 7 years ago. I cannot wait. Take a look.
There's been nothing like OSIRIS-REx in NASA's repertoire. I like to call it the Daredevil spacecraft.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Deliver it to Earth. How exciting is that?
Oh, this is wonderful because asteroids are time capsules. These are the leftover debris from the formation of the solar system itself. They have been relatively unchanged for 4.5 billion years. So if we want to understand what our solar system was like when the Earth was first forming, we have to look at the asteroids. But unfortunately, most asteroids are very, very far away from us, and it's very hard to study something that's so far away. So this mission, OSIRIS-REx, was launched 7 years ago, and in 2020, it finally reached its target, an asteroid called Bennu, took a sample of it, and is now returning that sample back to Earth, finally returning it back to Earth where we can study it in the laboratory.
7 years to deliver it in cosmic time is like same-day delivery. Paul Sutter, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And that does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.